We all set, Teresa?
Good, yeah.
I'd like to call to order the RTA Audit, Safety, Compliance, and Real Estate Committee. Roll call, please.
Mayor Kumar,
Here.
Ms. Welch, Ms. Elder, Ms. Pachetti.
Here.
Mr. Sleesman.
Yep.
And Mayor Weiss.
Here.
You have 5 committee members present. You have a quorum.
Great. We have the minutes of the November 26th meeting in front of us. I'll make a motion to approve that. Are there any comments or edits to those? If not, if I could have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Item number 3, we have the internal audit report. It's the presentation of the fourth quarter of 2024 internal audit activities, and also the presentation of the proposed 2025 internal audit plan. We've got Executive Director Garofoli and his team, and I know we reviewed this presentation on Friday, and I just want to give the whole team a lot of credit for how we're presenting things, but especially to you and Stephen for doing that. I think that highlights it in the buckets and sort of routine versus new and ongoing. I think that's really helpful for the committee, so thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, Mayor Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, members of the Leadership Group, and guests online. As Mayor Kumar said today, that we are ready to present the results of our fourth quarter 2024 audit year. Here's our agenda. Please, some grace. I wanted to make an announcement and congratulate Stephen Zimmerman on passing all parts of the certified fraud examination. He is now a certified fraud examiner.
You have a few comments prepared?
No comments, but excited to use the newfound knowledge and experience from studying for this program for the authority.
Great news. Congratulations.
Thank you. Now to the agenda. So conformance with the global internal audit standards, to remind the committee that on January 9th, 2025, marked the first date that the revised standards are effective, and we're doing our best to conform. One of those steps is to review and share the internal audit charter with the committee, and we are in progress. And if you'd like to say a word or two, Mayor, but we're working steadily with those stakeholders, and we intend to bring the revised charter to the committee in March.
That's great.
Thank you. All right, and then we also are going to give you an update on our Quality Assurance Improvement Program, which is also a requirement as we conform with these standards. So Stephen will give a presentation on that. Railcar Replacement and Infrastructure Audit Committee audit activities. This is a request from the board and the committee and management. And our lead auditor, Molly O'Donnell, will give that presentation. 2000 proposed risk-based internal audit plan, a requirement to put together a risk-based plan and present that to the committee for approval. And we'll ask that you refer that to the full board later on. And Stephen Zimmerman will present that. And then we'll present our regular fourth quarter activities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Zimmerman, who will talk about the Quality Assurance and Improvement Program.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning, Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, and members of the management team. My name is Stephen Zimmerman, and I'm the Audit Manager in the Internal Audit Department. Recall last quarter we spent some time talking through a renewed Quality Assurance and Improvement Program for the Internal Audit Department. Today we just have 2 updates, one related to a request to review and approve the 2025 key performance indicators, and the other is the progress on our corrective action plans from our conformance readiness assessment. So just as a reminder, a Quality Assurance and Improvement Program, abbreviated as a QAIP, is what enables an evaluation of an internal audit activity's conformance with the global internal audit standards. And it also assesses the efficiency and effectiveness of our activity and identifies opportunities for improvement. So the key performance indicators, we developed these to help identify the key measures, the department objectives, so that we can evaluate performance. And we tried to base these KPIs around being SMART objectives, so they were specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So last quarter, we went into detail on the various proposed metrics. My request at that time was for the board to provide feedback, which you did, and we had a good discussion on those KPIs at that board meeting. And then we told you at the time that we'd be bringing them back for the fourth quarter to request approval. So at this time, if the board has any specific questions or would like additional discussion on the KPIs as they were presented last quarter, this would be the time to discuss. We did not make any changes to the KPIs. Some of the key discussions from last time I know revolved around should we maintain a 90% or 100% target for the audit plan. I think we had a good discussion around that. Our request at this time is to keep it at 90% to allow us to have that float at the end of the year to prioritize project closure and also have some work transition into the next plan year without a disruption in assignment. And then the other concern was regarding the collection of satisfaction surveys and whether we'd have a sufficient sample. And I think one of the strategies that we're looking at potentially executing maybe towards the end of the KPI year would be an annual survey to grab maybe a second look at how people look holistically at the internal audit department rather than engagement by engagement.
And I just want to say, I know we've talked about it under the audit delivery and efficiency, that audit report timeliness. It's been great to see IA and management work together, because I know you need to get back to departments. They need to give you feedback as well. Keep that timeline tight and get the good information back to the authorities. So I think that I've seen that evolve, and I'm very happy to see that collaboration to wrap those things up at a timely basis.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any other comments from the board on any of these?
Okay. Hearing none, our request is that the audit committee approve our proposed 2025 key performance indicators. And if approved, we will come to the next quarterly meeting with the first quarter of the audit plan year, which will be March, April, May of 2025, with some populated information. And of course, you know, this is a trial. This is our first time doing KPIs, so if we need to make adjustments mid-year, that's also an opportunity.
I would move approval.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you. Next is a discussion of the readiness assessment results. Last quarter, I reported out on 11 action plans that were identified for implementation for us to be in full conformance with the new audit standards due to the changes in the audit standards and implementation of new areas. At this time, we have 3 implementations, 3 in progress, and 5 that are targeted for March. So the first one was related to honesty and professional courage, a requirement that client surveys that are sent out assess auditor honesty and professional courage. That was satisfied last quarter. The next is related to competency and maintaining a central repository for tracking training certifications and continuing professional education credits. We have that in progress, so we have a central repository established where staff can now submit all of their training so we can track it and also incorporate it into our KPIs. However, we still have to put pen to paper on formalizing our training program, so we anticipate to have that done soon. Next is related to continuing professional development for annual ethics training that is implemented. All staff received ethics training in 2024, and they will continue to receive ethics training annually into the future. For Section 5.2, protection of information, this is in progress, so there's two stages to this. One is to develop specific procedures to codify the existing department standards for requesting, storing, accessing, and sharing confidential information. But the second part, which is reviewing and enhancing our annual statements of confidentiality, has been completed. So all of our auditors have signed our annual statements of ethics and professionalism, as well as independence and objectivity. We did have to make some edits to the annual statements as a result of the changes in the global internal audit standards. So you might ask yourself, well, what's changed? Well, the internal audit standards used to brand this as Code of Ethics, but it's now been changed to Domain 2, Ethics and Professionalism. So it comes right before Domain 3, which we've talked about at length, which is governance. But what's the same is that the same core values still apply to all internal auditors. And those include integrity, objectivity, competence, due professional care, and confidentiality. So all of our staff has fully executed those newly updated assignments or statements that are in conformance with our new standards. Moving on, under the 7.2 of the Chief Audit Executive Qualifications, both the Executive Director's job description as well as the qualifications for a Executive Director and the succession plan for the Executive Director has been implemented as recommended by the Global Audit Standards. I can say that 8.3, establishing annual performance objectives, has just been moved from in progress to implemented, so thank you for approving our 2025 KPIs. 9.2, internal audit strategy. So we actually made some good progress on this topic as part of our annual planning retreat. So when we started our retreat this year, we actually spent about half of the day performing a SWOT analysis where we evaluated the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that are unique to us as internal auditors and the internal audit department. And what we did is we identified, what is the audit department good at? What are some of the weak spots that we can work to improve? Where are some areas that we can really improve ourselves and add more value to the organization as a whole? And that's going to serve as the foundation of our internal audit strategy, which is going to help us look forward to how over the next 3 to 5 years will we be able to deliver the audit plan as well as our internal audit mandate. Next is human resources management, developing a formal recruitment and retention policy that's targeted for March completion. We are lucky in that we are fully staffed for the first time in quite some time. So, of course, having a strategy for recruiting, if we were to have a vacancy again, is important, but arguably more important at this point is a strong retention policy to ensure that auditors have all the resources and incentives that they need to have a successful career here at the RTA. And rounding out the remaining corrective action plans, communicating results, establishing a process for communicating engagement themes at defined intervals. So when we go through the internal audit plan proposed for 2025 later in the presentation, you'll see that we've identified 6 audit themes for the 2025 year. And the intention is that once an audit department has completed a set number of audits that are aligned with an audit theme, we would then be in a position to provide a report that could report holistically on what is the organization's stance and current standing in relation to that theme. So for example, in 2024, we completed many audits along the theme of customer experience. So we anticipate that by mid-year 2025, we'll be in a position to actually produce a theme report on how the authority stands with customer experience initiatives and programs. The next is performance measurement. So now that we have our KPIs approved, we'll need to demonstrate the maintaining an active measurement of those performance objectives, which we'll have in place by March and we'll present to the next quarterly meeting. And then finally, the recommendations and action plans, the review and update of the administrative procedure that facilitates management response to audit recommendations. This is what, as Mayor Kumar was relating to earlier, is a key component of our reporting process because we do not issue recommendations without obtaining a management response first, and this helps establish the guidelines, timelines, and format in which that management response occurs. It's not that the process is outdated, it's just that the administrative procedure is quite old, so it would be good to take a chance to refresh it and put a new timestamp on it as part of the refresh of the audit standards.
You know, I'd like to add that the administrative procedure is a GCRTA procedure that's authored and administered by the general manager. And that's that dotted line that we have to the general manager for her to support us in our efforts as we work with the deputy general managers and others to implement recommendations.
I will now turn it over to Molly O'Donnell, who will talk about our rail replacement and infrastructure audit activities.
Good morning, Audit Chair Kumar and members of the Audit Committee. The Audit Committee and the Board has asked us to have a focus on the rail car replacement program in its entirety. So these slides will detail not only our contract compliance audit activities for the contract with Siemens Mobility, but the other activities that we are engaged in for the rest of the program. So our contract compliance audit activities for the contract with Siemens Mobility include not only the base contract, but both options that the authority has entered into. For the pre-award contract compliance activities. We recently completed a pre-award by America review on site at Sacramento in December for the most recent option. At this point, we're engaged in post-award contract compliance audit activities. This includes project management and deliverables audits, contract administration audits, including our change order monitoring and invoice reviews. Here's a slide in our typical format covering our objective and scope. As an update on this slide, management is completing first article inspections at primary supplier locations. Management has completed the railcar quality assurance design, and management is engaging design consultants for infrastructure modifications. The audit committee and the board has asked us to monitor and evaluate change orders closely. This is the change order log that's created by the procurement department. The original contract amount was $163 million, and the total change order amount to date is $144 million. Since we last shared this slide, we entered into the most recent option, which is that change order number 6 there. The project management team keeps track of all potential change orders. So these are things that may or may not become a change order, and this is the log that they use to do that.
You'll see there's a couple change orders, potential change orders at the bottom of the chart that are still in either discussion and or negotiation. Yes, this is a complete log. Correct.
Can we go back to the slide before this one? The total. Trying to tie out the 144 million and that change order log with the one we saw, just that one. Help me connect those dots.
Does this include? No, it does. I was going to.
We're connecting.
The
I'm sorry, Mayor. We're connecting the dots between the potential change order log and the change order log. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I was trying to, where it says total change order amount to date, 144 million. That includes which items? These 6?
Is that in the
Assuming one is the original purchase amount, and then you have the option to exercise. Yeah, and the exercise is in there, I think, is item 4.
This slide should have more than 144 because there are things that we haven't entered in all of these.
Right. Yes, so, go ahead, Molly.
Well, at the top in the black box, the settled amount that 144 million matches more or less, but they shouldn't exactly match because these are all of the change orders that we've entered on this log, and we haven't entered all of these yet. Yeah, that change order is not included. As you can see the close date in the GCRTA change order number, it doesn't, that's not populated, and it says the status is ongoing, so we have not entered that change order yet. It says still a PCO, a potential change order.
Maybe that's a black box we could pull out those dates to
We can do that. And keep in mind that this is a project management record, not an audit record, not a procurement record. This is just an ongoing running list of potential change orders that are brought forth, either to negotiate, discuss, and move to the log once approved.
So for clarification, this is Trustee Elder. So the 144 is the amount to date. That is correct.
That's
The other, the spreadsheet we were just looking at includes potential.
that's correct.
Okay, so that's why the numbers don't match up. Okay.
We also review payments to Siemens made as part of our review of the financial management system. So including the change orders, the total contract amount is that 308 million number there on the first bullet point. We have paid 74.5 million of that as of February 7th. That means that we've paid 24% of the contract amount plus change orders. In addition to our contract with Siemens Mobility, there are a ton of other contracts involved in this big railcar replacement program, and these next two slides detail them. The port connector construction is currently under audit, and many of these rail infrastructure-related projects will be under audit as they enter the construction phase of the project. The FTA has assigned a project management oversight consultant to the railcar replacement project. The responsibilities of that consultant are to monitor whether the project's on time, within budget, in compliance with all applicable federal requirements. And as we've shared before, that project management oversight consultant has also audited our work as the internal audit department for the pre-award for the base and the first option. The PMOC is holding us to the standard of intermediate audits. So when we were on site in Sacramento, we did a bit of this intermediate audit for the last option. We did a little bit of this intermediate audit work. And then they will engage when we complete the post-delivery Buy America review when the rail cars are being manufactured and domestic content monitoring. That project management oversight consultant is Ellis Gallegos in Chicago. Internal audit staff is actively engaged in the project management oversight monthly check-in meetings. If there are no more questions on the rail car replacement project, I'll turn it over to Stephen to discuss the audit plan.
Thank you.
All right, what you see before you is a picture of us in our war room up on the 5th floor where we are actively discussing and perhaps debating projects, risks, objectives for the authority to help develop the 2025 audit plan. And you can see some of the results of our brainstorming on sheets that we've surrounded our office with. So that helps facilitate our discussions, and all the information that we write on the sheets eventually ends up into some computer system, but we like the tactile feel of the manual planning as well. So for the 2025 proposed internal audit plan, I'll refer to its purpose aligned with the board policy as well as our global internal audit standards. So the board policy in our internal audit charter requires that the executive director submit annually a risk-based internal audit plan, and then the global internal audit standards also say that annually a risk-based audit plan should be developed that supports the achievement of an organization's objectives. And that annual plan is based on a risk assessment, which the charter also requires that we conduct an entity-wide risk assessment that helps prioritize risk and establish a list of auditable entities. And this is also the best practice and standard of the global internal audit standards, where an internal audit plan should be documented based on an evaluation of the organization's objectives and strategies, risks, and the assessment should be done at least annually. A little breakdown into our methodology of how we develop our risk assessment and annual planning. So it starts with feedback, and that feedback comes from various levels of the organization. We solicited feedback from the Board of Trustees, we solicited feedback from senior management, and we also solicited feedback from line management. And we did that through a number of different methods that included interviews, forms, surveys, formal and informal discussions. And we do this feedback and information seeking so that we can understand what are the business objectives and risks of those objectives, particularly as it relates to the upcoming year. In addition to this information from leadership, we also review documents that are unique to the RTA, including our strategic plan, our financial statements, the operating and capital budgets, and then we also have internal and external resources that we can use to supplement our assessment. This includes surveys and publications that are issued by both the Institute of Internal Auditors as well as the Association of Public Transportation, American Public Transportation Association, APTA, which publishes resources on risks that are common to organizations globally, as well as risks that are unique to public transit agencies. We use all this information to develop our risk universe, which is our auditable entities, and it also includes our objectives, risks, and controls. We score strategic risk against those organizational objectives and helps us prioritize our list of potential projects that will address strategic risk. This is a little insight into some of the capabilities of our audit management system. So when we're interacting with Teammate Plus, which is the planning and execution software that we use for performing audits and our annual risk assessment, it requires that we look at the different organizational objectives as well as the strategic risks that could impede those objectives. And when we have defined for all entities and all objectives across the authority 6 common strategic risks. These include operational risk, financial risk, reputational risk, compliance risk, fraud, waste, and abuse risk, and information technology risk. Underneath a strategic risk could be a process-specific risk, which would be a unique factor that could affect the attainment of an objective. So under a strategic risk of operations, there might be a process-specific risk, such as a disruption in the middle of service. And then management has implemented controls across the authority that are meant to mitigate, prevent, transfer, or avoid risk at the RTA. When we assess risk against the organizational objectives on a strategic level, we're able to provide assurance that helps the board and the agency in its governance functions because we're addressing the highest, most relevant risk to the authority. And then when we do our risk scoring, as you see on the bottom right, we risk rate both impact and likelihood that a potential risk might materialize. And these are done on an inherent basis, so in the absence of controls, because the act of performing an audit is where we can assess whether controls are working effectively, which would ultimately either drive risk down or up based on how those controls are rated. When we look at impact of a risk, that's if the risk occurred, how bad would it be to the authority? It could be financial, it could be reputational, it could be operational, but you get the idea. And then the likelihood is what's the chance of it occurring? And you require those 2 levels of assessment to get a composite risk score. When we do our risk scoring, we have to score under a certain entity. And one of the enhancements that we've done for the 2025 plan year is we've actually added another layer of entities that we assess at the authority. So traditionally, we have the RTA, which is the overall entity, and underneath that single entity are all the different divisions of the authority, which are led by a deputy general manager. Then underneath the division would be the various departments, and those are usually run by a director. In 2025, we've now added another layer down, which is the subgroup level of a manager. So for example, within the finance division, you'd have the accounting department. But then the accounting department has many subgroups, which include accounts payable, general accounting, which includes both accounts receivable as well as financial statement review, and then the payroll group. So by assessing entity at this more granular level, we can get at risks that are more specific to those lower subgroups and allow us to better align our audit plan with the various initiatives, projects, and risks that faces the authority based on those specific activities. So the result is once we've done our entity-wide risk assessment, we can generate a list of eligible audits that are prioritized by risk rank. And then we have to use a resource allocation model to determine how many hours do we have to accomplish the annual audit plan for the year. And we start assigning those projects to the highest ranked projects first. If we did not have sufficient hours to cover the highest risk items in the authority, we'd let you know if we need additional resources. However, we feel that we have sufficient resources to obtain the projects that are highest prioritized by risk for 2025. And then this would maybe be unfair to say it's the last step because I feel like it's integrated throughout our entire planning process, but we also made sure that all of our projects are aligned with audit themes for 2025. So last year we started developing audit themes as part of the new global internal audit standards, and we've refined it even more in 2025. So on the audit plan, you'll see that we have 6 specific themes, 4 of which are tied to the GCRTA success outcomes, and then 2 of them are unique high-risk areas in the authority, which include configuration management and IT governance. And as I said earlier in the presentation, in relation to the Quality Assurance and Improvement Program, our intention is that as we complete projects in these audit theme areas, we'll be able to provide cohesive, holistic reports assessing authority performance in these themes. For all the board members, in your board package, you should have received a copy of our 2025 proposed risk-based audit plan. It is 3 pages. I do have all 3 pages up here, so I have to go across 2 slides. This would be a good time if the board had questions, comments, requests for clarification, so that we can discuss the proposed audit plan prior to requesting your recommending for approval to the Board of Trustees.
Be advised, we shared this plan in a presentation with General Manager India Birdsong-Terry, and we also shared the plan, the proposed plan, with the senior management group.
Maybe just to expound a little bit on the configuration management theme.
Sure. So configuration management represents a couple different things at the authority. One, it represents, do we know all the different assets that we have? Do we know the maintenance requirements for those assets? Do we have a plan to replace those assets when or before they reach the end of their useful life? And do we have all the relevant data and information about those assets? So the configuration management theme recognizes that, well, we can do an audit on the configuration management process, but that only gets to a portion of configuration management when there's so many different elements to configuration management that permeate the entire organization. So we've got a number of projects that tie to that theme of have configuration management governance and controls been put in place and working effectively to ensure that, for example, if we buy new products, build new facilities, are those properly entered into our configuration management environment? If changes occur to assets, is that properly recorded? And we had completed a configuration management audit a number of years ago as part of the Public Transportation Agency Safety Program, and we made some recommendations for improvement. Management is working towards those recommendations, although there is still some progress to be made, so that's why it is also a priority for our 2025 audit plan.
Let me provide an example for you, Mayor. So when Mike Schipper's group turns over a facility to the organization, it'll be a list of assets, it'll be the warranties, it'll be the drawings, and then certain maintenance requirements from those suppliers. Is all that information entered into our asset management system? And then it goes from there to our mechanics and our facilities maintenance people. Are they maintaining the buildings or facilities in the manner that it has been recommended by those manufacturers or those suppliers? So looking at work orders, looking at inventory, looking at supply chain management. So those are some of the areas that are comprised of configuration management.
It's helpful. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I had the same question as the mayor. So this is about something a little different, the success outcomes. So I just wanted to, I don't have the 2024 audit plan in front of me, but they look really good to me: customer experience, community impact, financial health, employee investment. I just wanted to understand context. So are these the same or different than outcomes that we may have had before? And then do they align in any particular way to the strategic plan objectives, or are they unique to audit?
So if I can answer, you'll see on the third page of the proposed plan, so that's items 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the success factors that have been identified, within our performance management and metrics, success outcomes. Those were the same as last year.
Okay.
They have some enhanced titles, okay, but they are the same as last year. We have a responsibility, per our professional standards, to align our plan with the organization standards and metrics, so that reflects this. And then in addition to that, we see these 2 additional IT governance and configuration management as themes that we can classify projects in terms of risk.
That's great. And then, thank you. And then just going forward for things like customer experience, I would assume that Nick, the new hire over customer experience, am I saying that right? Will be consulted just like all the other managers are when you're trying to understand where the goals should be and the progress is for the organization. Is that right?
We look forward to working closely with Nick,
Okay.
as well as the other deputy general managers and directors in this organization who are responsible for these other themes.
Great.
So for sure, working with Nick on customer experience.
I think that's all for me. Thanks.
If I can piggyback, so Tony's correct. The 4 that you see, the customer experience, community impact, financial health, and employee investment, are the same traction goals that you see in our strategic kind of short-term plan is what I call it, right? So those are the 4, and those are replicated here. The idea that the entire agency is invested in these 4 goals is accurate. And so Nick will not be the only owner of the customer experience. That's everybody, just for clarification. Same thing for the other 3. But Nick is a good example of a director that has been elevated to a position that will start to have more employees under his charge to also be able to monitor the goals that we are setting before ourselves. And audit is really here to be able to support that work, to make sure that the projects that we have status quo, right? Whether they're the rail car, whether they're disaster recovery, IT, you name it, really fall in line with the idea that we want to provide, excuse me, good customer service, good financial stewardship, so on and so forth. So these are not new, but these should fall in line with whatever the 4 that we always have within traction. So if that changes, then you should see this also change as well. The additional 2, as was mentioned by Stephen and Tony, I think were additions from the internal audit, but I support those and I think they make sense.
Anyone else? Okay.
Yeah, so staff requests that the audit committee recommend to the Board of Trustees the proposed 2025 audit plan for approval.
Great, I'll make a motion to that effect. Do we have a second?
Second, Pachetti?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're going to move that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will now transition our presentation into the Internal Audit Quarterly Report 4th quarter activities. So the 4th quarter report will follow the similar format that we're used to, including the enhancements to the more detail for completed projects, but more summary for projects in progress. So I updated this graphic, which we presented at the last 2 quarterlies, and this shows the 2025 audit plan coverage by audits scheduled. It's very similar in coverage to last year's plan. I should just maybe expound upon some of these different categories quickly. So internal audits, that captures sort of our operational and financial audits, and it's our largest category. Contract audits are specific to audits where we might be looking at a contract such as a major services agreement, a construction, as well as Buy America audits fall under that category. Information technology audits are always a large portion of our plan. New development in 2025 is that we're no longer going to just have IT audits done by someone with the title of an IT auditor. We're trying to develop the staff so that everyone has information technology audit capacity and capability. So we have a new resource allocation model to ensure that all members of the team get to engage with the IT side, which includes Andrew Scott and Randy Bowles on the IT audits for 2025. We also have our continuous audits, which include the ones that are well-developed and we report on quarterly, as well as the ones that are going to be in development for the year. External audits, which require external coordination with our outside assurance providers, so those can include the State Safety Oversight, the Federal Transit Administration, and the State of Ohio. Advisory engagements where we might collaborate with management to help provide insight or advice. This is in contrast to what otherwise would be considered an assurance engagement. So when we engage in an advisory engagement, it's advice-based, not assurance-based work. And then finally, we keep our category of railcar audits, things that are specific to the railcar program.
Great. One question, and I did not, I thought about this after we had our meeting last week, relative to expanding the IT audits and spreading it across. Do you envision additional training for your team, or how are you going to implement that and manage that?
Well, let me begin to say that we are fortunate to have 2 IT professionals on our staff. Okay, so we're relying on them to help train and lead us. There are a number of initiatives we've begun training. You know, we've had some foundational training throughout the department, and then we're going to have some targeted training as needed to complete these audits. We're certainly going to have a cybersecurity focus and an IT focus in 2025.
Yeah, and I know you and I have talked about this a lot, but from the cybersecurity front of penetration testing and things like that, and that's even probably outside of your audits, but with some new IT resources on staff, I would continue from management or IA to want to get updates on that, because more than likely it's not if, it's when, and having a plan prepared to keep the organization running, super important.
Thank you, Mayor, and we look forward to working with both Flounce's group and Raj's group that manage both of these IT functions here at the authority. We're going to be bringing in the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency again this year to help us with some assessments.
This next slide is the 2024 audit plan progress for the 4th quarter. If you recall the graph from last quarter, we've made significant progress in the completed projects element of this graph, with a lot of completed work done in the 4th quarter. I will mention that for the majority of the year, we were down 1 FTE before Kylie Cianciola was hired by us in August of 2024. So we did not correct our audit plan in 2024. We did not size it expecting us to be an FTE down for the entire year. The intention always was to keep the audit plan right-sized to our full budgeted amount. So we did not complete all of our audits for the year, but we did make significant progress. We do have a number of audits that are in progress, which include planning and risk assessment, fieldwork, and reporting. And then any of the projects that we did not start, they're going to be rolled forward into 2025. So no projects are being dropped for the 25 audit plan year. All right, I will kick us off with the completed projects, as I completed a project in 2024 4th quarter, and that would be the Railcar Equipment Workforce Development Audit. The objective of this audit was to provide assurance that the RTA would be sufficiently prepared to support the success of new railcar maintenance through the lens of workforce development. We specifically looked at preparation activities between 2021 and 2024 under this topic, aligned with the audit theme of employee investment. And the results were satisfactory, and we had a recommendation for management. To highlight some management successful practices, the GCRTA training department got engaged very early on with the Transportation Learning Center, which helped the RTA develop a curriculum for up-to-speed training, which they're deploying across all rail mechanics in the rail equipment shop. This up-to-speed training represents approximately 40 years of technological advancement between our current railcar fleet and the anticipated Siemens fleet. This training will set the rail equipment shop up for success, because the mechanics will now have a new baseline where they'll be able to engage with the to-be-offered Siemens training. So they're trying to close that gap in the difference between railcar technology and prepare everyone for the new railcar fleet when it does arrive. In addition to that, they've also taken a proactive approach in expanding their staff as well as their facilities to accommodate the growing training needs for the new railcar program. And then we also have an approved Siemens training plan as part of the program contract. So all very successful practices which lended this audit a satisfactory rating. We did have one recommendation, which was just specific to the future state of electronics maintenance on the rail car. As you know, as I said earlier, it's a 40-year technological advancement leap. So some of the electronics that the current mechanics are used to working on is going to change significantly. And we have some existing in-house expertise in the form of electronic repair that might be able to use to be leveraged as additional resources for these different maintenance activities. Oh, and I'll turn it over to Andrew Scott, who will talk about his completed projects for 2024.
Good morning, Audit Chair Kumar, GM CEO Birdsong Terry, and members of the Audit Committee. My first completed project is that of the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, focused on the Emergency Operations Plan. The objective was to validate the GCRTA's PTAP session on emergency management, and that it meets compliance requirements, and that the GCRTA is sufficiently prepared with an updated emergency plan that incorporates emergency technology resilience. The scope of the audit was the current emergency operations plan and continuity of operations plan, along with selected activities, including planning, training, logging, et cetera, from the years 2020 through 2024. The audit theme that this related to were customer experience as well as employee investment, and the results were marginally unsatisfactory with recommendations from management. As we went through the audit, we identified some successful practices by management, those being that documentation was updated in a timely manner. There's regular coordination with local responders throughout the county, as well as regular coordination with our federal partners. The recommendations that we identified were along the themes of both internal and external training, document accessibility, as well as post-incident debriefs. And as a follow-up to this audit, we intend to plan for a tabletop drill with executive management and the emergency response teams in 2025. The next completed project was an audit of identity and access management for our bid dispatch system, HASTIS. The objective was to evaluate the controls in place for accessing critical authority systems, where this engagement focused on our operator bid dispatch system, HASTIS. The scope was the current HASTIS identity access management configuration. The theme pertains to audit governance, to IT governance, and the results were unsatisfactory with recommendations from management. So the HASTIS application has a fairly new system administrator. So some of the successful practices that we identified was their readiness to learn on the fly, to begin adjusting configuration as issues were readily identified, and then began taking steps to start implementing governance items. And the recommendations, again, follow the themes of governance, identity management, authorization, access control, authentication, and monitoring. And the breakdown of those recommendations, was just, there were a number of recommendations specific to the HASTIS application to be made by the system administrator and the ITS department. And then there were another set of recommendations that were produced for the higher up management level pertaining to overall IT governance that would be addressed by the directors of MIS and IT. Next, we will turn it over to Randy Bowles for his completed projects.
Good morning, Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, General Manager, CEO Birdsong Terry, and guests. Fuel expense, diesel and gasoline. The objective is to evaluate supplier contract compliance and obtain and evaluate information related to fuel storage, dispensing, and reporting. And the scope was 3 basic items: invoice fueling from 23 through 24, and that just gives us assurance that we were just billed properly. Fuel delivery covers 21 through 24, and that just gives us some assurance that the proper gallons were delivered to us. And the current asset and information system configuration, that ties into the theme that Mayor Kumar was talking about earlier in the presentation. And the audit theme overall for this was financial health, and the results were satisfactory. And the management success practices was 100% reconciliation of fuel invoices to the contract rate, oil price information services for OPUS, and there was a less than a 2% variance in fuel deliveries between invoices and fuel tank, and which was immaterial, and accurate user records. And one thing that I can't remember the name of the department we were working with, but kind of want to give them a shout out, was this was one of the first ones that I did continuous audit on. It was a continuous audit and audit at the same time. And some of the things I noticed was there were like 10 different rates that were charged, for fueling. And some of those rates changed daily, some changed quarterly, and I think the contract rate changed every few years. And for like unleaded gasoline, some of the calculations were on 90%, some of them were on 100%. So it's not rocket science, the calculations, but over the entire period that I did the continuous audit on, I didn't find a single inaccuracy anywhere. So it was like everything matched up. So I think it really shows how well they did and how well the continuous audit, now that this is going to be a monthly process, can kind of keep assurances on it. And some of the recommendations were the prioritize funding to replace aging and obsolete fuel tank and monitoring hardware, prioritize funding to replace aging and fueling dispensing equipment.
Thank you, Randy. Good morning, Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, General Manager, CEO Birdsong Terry, and guests. My name is Kylie Cianciola. So to continue sharing completed projects, I'd like to touch on petty cash. So the objective was to analyze petty cash replenishment history via Oracle reports, conduct counts of cash and evaluation of receipts for all active petty cash accounts per Section 5.1 of Administrative Procedure 003, review acknowledgement of accountability forms for completeness. The scope was all petty cash replenishments in 2023 and 2024, cash and receipts in GCRTA petty cash accounts, acknowledgement of accountability forms for petty cash custodians. The audit theme is financial health. The results are satisfactory. Management successful practices for petty cash included closure of Hayden petty cash account. 100% of all acknowledgement of accountability forms were fully executed. There were 0 recommendations. For travel and expense reimbursement, the objective is to review all trip reports and travel expense reimbursements for compliance with policy and procedures. The scope is 100% of all trips and expenses. The results, compliant with policy. All non-compliant trip reports are returned to travelers for correction and then are re-reviewed by internal audit prior to processing. I will now hand it over to Darren Garlock.
Thank you, Kylie. Good morning, Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, and General Manager, CEO Birdsong Terry. For my first completed projects, it was the supply chain contract management audit. The objective was to identify all contracts that are centrally managed by the supply chain department. We wanted to document the contract management strategies that are utilized for each contract, assess risk associated with the centrally managed supply chain contracts, including risks related to each contract's deliverables. And then we wanted to evaluate the efficacy of contract management controls. Our scope was the control environment for all contracts that are centrally managed by the supply chain department, and it tied to the audit theme of financial health. Our results were unsatisfactory with recommendations for management. Some management successful practices that were identified, contract management personnel implemented process improvements during the audit to enhance their controls, and they had also developed dashboards to help them monitor contract spending. The recommendations we issued for them to develop a methodology to verify that services are performed at the decentralized locations prior to the approval of invoice payment, and to implement various contract-specific strategies to mitigate risk of erroneous payments based on observed deficiencies. My next completed project was part of the PTASP, Maintenance Management SOPs and Documentation Audit. The objective was to evaluate GCRTA processes and procedures to maintain, update, and utilize maintenance manuals and standard operating procedures in the rail equipment shop. Our scope was rail equipment shop maintenance management SOPs that had been updated since January 1st, 2021, documentation of these SOPs within the maintenance management system, approval of SOP revisions by other stakeholders, and the retraining that occurs whenever an SOP is revised. This audit tied to the audit themes of financial health and employee investment, and the results were satisfactory with recommendations for management. So some successful practices that were identified. Rail equipment has reviewed and updated 70% of maintenance management SOPs since 2020, and management provided appropriate retraining to rail employees, rail equipment employees, for all SOP revisions that were in the sample. For our recommendations, first was to create a clear link between feedback fields in the maintenance management system and the related step in the SOP. And then the second was to adopt a formal process facilitated by asset and configuration management for documenting and approving all SOP revisions, including obtaining formal sign-offs from relevant stakeholder departments outside of rail equipment. Asset and configuration management should maintain records of all approved SOPs. And then my third completed project, service quality bus field supervision. The objective was to evaluate the processes and procedures in place to successfully perform field supervision of buses that are in revenue service. The scope was 2023 supervisor activity logs, bus field supervision coverage, service assessment remarks or SARs generation, and SAR district follow-up. This audit tied to the theme of customer experience, and the results were unsatisfactory with recommendations for management. Some successful practices that were identified. Management introduced an electronic version of the daily log form that's used by service quality supervisors in the field and is in the process of issuing the supervisors new tablets. And then they've also implemented a secret shopper evaluation to supplement supervisor observations of operator performance in the field. For our recommendations, the first is to reinforce the requirement for service quality supervisors to complete daily log forms, to reinforce requirement that service quality supervisors complete daily log forms electronically within en-route, define a minimum threshold for creating a supervisor's assessment report to ensure that service quality supervisors consistently generate them, develop a consistent standard for documenting SARs in the operator's performance file, define a strategy for route observations in the field, and finally, to create a new supervisor's daily log form to help facilitate report generation and data analysis. And with that, I would like to introduce Laura Crawshaw, who is going to discuss her completed projects.
Thank you, Darren. Good morning, Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, General Manager, CEO Birdsong Terry. My first completed project from the quarter was an audit of the Hayden roof replacement project. Our objective was to provide assurance over engineering project management controls for the roof replacement project. Our scope is project management activities from notice to proceed through final completion. This audit tied to the audit themes of financial health and community impact, and our results were satisfactory. We identified that all project management controls are in place and working effectively in this project, and we had no recommendations from management. My second completed project from the quarter was an audit of accident incident training and discipline outcomes. Our objective was to evaluate the processes and controls in place to ensure the efficacy, consistency, and quality of training and discipline outcomes that result from accident and incident review. Our scope was 100% of operator post-accident retrains from 2023, a sample of operator discipline records for preventable accidents in 2023, and accident review committee training records. This theme tied to the employee investment audit theme. And our results were marginally unsatisfactory with recommendations for management. The successful practices we identified for management were consistent discipline practices between operating districts and coordination and collaboration between several departments, including training, service quality, and the operating districts to implement corrective actions. Our recommendations for management were to perform retrains for operators where we identified missing retrain records, create a standing operating procedure to establish accountability and ownership for retrain assignment from accident review committee determinations, and lastly, to establish a severity criteria to prioritize those retrains and consider pulling operators from service that are categorized as high risk until those retrains are complete. I'll turn it back over to Darren to talk about our projects in progress.
Thank you, Laura. All right, so for every audit that we do, there are 3 phases. The planning phase, fieldwork, which is can also be referred to as the testing phase, and then finally the reporting phase. So right now, this is our projects in progress that are in the planning risk assessment phase. And then it continues on into this second slide of those projects in planning. Now this is projects that are currently in the fieldwork or testing phase. And then finally, these are audit projects that are in the reporting phase. This slide is just our projects in progress for Buy America, with the status column on the right-hand side. And if there aren't any questions, I'd like to hand it over to Randy Bowles, who will discuss continuous auditing.
Go through all 7 steps, but it's a method of utilizing a series of scripts to perform auditing activities on a more frequent basis to identify risks and any exceptions for investigation by appropriate staff and management. And this is a list of all the continuous audits we have currently, which are nepotism, purchasing card, payroll, revenue reconciliation, which are all done monthly, and then paratransit customer eligibility is done annually, and currently we're waiting on data from the state of Ohio. As soon as we get that, that will be started and completed. Revenue, this consists of, you can see over on the right-hand side, it lists the revenue that we're tracking. It's in-station revenue, well, actually, it's in a little different order. Mobile, in-station credit, in-station cash, and farebox cash. And down at the bottom, where you can see it's in green, everything is under the 2% variance, and that's the tolerable rate between the money that comes out of the farebox and what we count and what's deposited to the bank. And just overall, what this slide shows is all the money that's collected, counted, deposited to the bank, and posted to the GL. And in purchasing card, the top bar across the top shows, some of the fourth quarter results, the total, the average purchase, the highest purchase, and the count. And on the right where it says tests, documentation missing, document review, non-US, holiday and weekends, those are the tests that we look for. And just because something is flagged, that in itself doesn't mean anything is wrong. That's just something that we take a look at, and it kind of shows that we really try to stay on top of everything. And the next one here is payroll.
Can I ask you a question on the purchasing, just for a second? Just general policy information. Does that require that one for 10,000,008? Did that require a purchase order of any type?
It's 10,000.
Or is that 10,000?
800. That's okay.
Sorry. Yeah, okay.
And that requires an authorizing signature by the procurement director.
Okay.
And that was completed. We checked that.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, payroll, this just highlights some of the dollar volumes for the fourth quarter. We analyze 7 periods, and because it's a continuous audit, we go through all 46,000 records, and some of the tests are excessive work hours, excessive overtime, terminated employees, and deductions less than 10%. And again, just because something gets flagged doesn't mean anything is wrong. And this is for FOP, non-bargaining, and ATU. And this is the same slide. Instead of quarterly, it's just showing the full year with the bar charts. And these are the continuous audits that were in development for 2025. Darren, I think, did the compensatory time audit, and he utilized a lot of our continuous audit software. So I thought that would be a good candidate, since a lot of the preliminary work is already done, to work on running that on some time frame. I'm not sure what time frame will be adequate for it, but we got mobile ticketing, reconciliation, which is in development, fuel expense, dependent eligibility, and we're looking at developing some dashboards for some of these continuous audits. I think, Andrew, you're up.
Can I just ask one question, going back to that payroll slide when you were talking about things being flagged, but it not necessarily being of concern?
Mm-hmm.
What are the reasons why something would flag?
Well, for example, one of the ones that we added recently was terminated employees. And say it was a long period of time before, between the date the employee was terminated and the date that they were paid seemed too long. Tony will take notes of it, and then he'll go investigate it, why something like that took as long as it did, and then take appropriate steps as necessary.
Trustee Elder, another example. So if we see some excessive hours worked, perhaps we see a mechanic that's worked 80 hours of overtime in one pay period. So we'll contact the equipment manager. We may look at work orders, and we'll try to determine why were so many hours expended. So it's just a flagging mechanism for us, so that we can follow up, and we do.
Okay, thank you.
before we go on to technology, could I also ask a question? And I'm going back a little bit here to some of the completed projects. I could be wrong in my recollection of this, but there were probably a few more unsatisfactory conclusions. And I just want to talk about sort of follow-up from there. I know the audit, internal audit tracks all of those and goes back, and we've talked about that in the past. This was really maybe more for the administration. Just, are there, do we set time periods by which we want to correct those, and or how does that process work, or it depends on what the topic is?
Mayor, when we meet with the, we call them our customers or stakeholders, we gain agreement with them because, you know, each recommendation is customized, to the business unit that we're working with. So for example, if it's reasonable to complete something within, 2 weeks, or is it reasonable to complete something within 3 months, we will agree upon a date. And then our system has some reminder notifications built in. So if it's 90 days, each 30-day period, they'll get a notification from our system. Please provide a status. Please provide a status. Should the stakeholder need additional time, we'll work through that and agree with it. And then we also use that dotted line with the general manager's office, in that administrative procedure that you saw earlier in the presentation, so that we can, encourage the behaviors to close out some of these recommendations.
If I can add one more thing. At the end of every engagement, we do a lessons learned review where we bring the audit team together and we talk about the audit, what went well, what could be improved. But as part of our standard review is how quickly should we cycle this audit engagement again? So something that has a more unsatisfactory rating where there's a significant amount of implementation that needs to occur will be cycled much more sooner than some audit that was satisfactory with controls in place.
So if I could, so I'm glad I didn't know where to jump in, so thank you, Mayor Weiss. Just going back, I had some notes, and I've gone through this, as stated before, with the audit team. Also gone through this ad nauseum with some of the directors that are involved with the items. Just a quick question, if this is the right insertion point. So a few of the ones that had unsatisfactory or they're marginally unsatisfactory, as I'm reading through and looking through the recommendations, have a lot to do with IT governance. And some of them also have a lot to do with, I'm paraphrasing, right? Databases or housing information, accessing controls. So just from your perspective, and I know everyone did not do every audit, but just, is there a different level of expectation for the technology as it associates with each one of these audits? Because some of these things have been audited for years. And so I want to make sure that we also, I think it's a good thing, that we talk about how we become more transparent, how we become more accessible, how we also review some of our processes. But I think it's important to note, and this is also to the DGMs that own some of these items. So Raj, looking at you, Doc, looking at you, for example, George as well, to be able to think about, are we having conversations? And I am aware that the IT governance, I think those meetings are getting started back up, if I'm not mistaken. And also the incorporation of the new IT director on the hardware side, so to speak, on IT. Are we having conversations to say, hey, look, as we're auditing, we're also setting the expectation to be a little bit more stringent than we have before, or either we need to get back to where we used to be so that we also don't have these come up time and time again. I know I'm asking a lot in one comment, but also wanted to make sure that we can also flag, to a point I think that was made earlier, if we are meeting again in another quarter and nothing has been done, or marginally unsatisfactory response has been completed, how do we flag that internally so we say, hey, look, this is something that we've had on the docket for 6 months in a row, and we're at the same place, we need to be able to speed it up.
Let me try to address your information technology issue. So the information technology standards are continually enhanced. We're all aware of the cybersecurity issues that we face, risks that we face, and they are mounting. Certainly, the authority has its share of inventory of IT systems. So when you see us auditing a system like the bid dispatch system, it's one system. It's our intention to cycle through and audit every one of the business systems here at the authority over some period of time, and then repeat those audits where we find that there is a high risk, and should require that frequency. We will be using the Information Systems Audit program. Andrew has introduced that to us with his certification. We're looking for things like role-based access, tying to job descriptions, tightening down the security of the access controls, and again, cycling this audit program through every one of the systems. So I think what I wanted to say was, don't be alarmed when you see that we are going to bring a system to you, a major system at a time, with those results. It's not going to be indicative of the organization. It's just indicative of that particular system that we're auditing, okay? Then there are some general IT controls. We are fortunate to have our new IT director, Charles Morgan, and he's doing more than just the information technology governance for hardware. He also has for access control and software as well. So I know that in working with Dr. Caver, he has provided Charles with some direction, Charles Morgan with some direction to put together an IT governance strategy and plan, and we look forward to working along with him as he implements, and then we'll follow up with audit.
So if I can, so thank you for that, Tony. I think it's important for not only from, if I could speak on behalf of the board side, right, who's not here every day, but also the management side, who's kind of in the galleries, to understand if we have a red alarm, on fire kind of problem, or we're simply making a recommendation for upgrading the system that has seemingly worked, but we're pushing ourselves kind of to a stretch goal. So that's something that I would just think about, and we can maybe think about ways that we can make a differentiation between the two, because it is a little alarming if I see 5 projects all of a sudden that are unsatisfactory. Now, that being said, nothing is all of a sudden. So we're either setting the bar a little higher, or we've degraded the system that we already had. So knowing the difference in that, I think, is going to be extremely helpful, so that we know kind of when to push and to pull. But I think this is great that we're actually moving forward through these projects. One thing, if I can ask, there was an item that had to do with retraining, and it was post-accident, slide 68. So I have that one as well as slide 62. Now, I'm saying this because I already had these conversations with Tony, but I want to make sure that I also talk through this while we have the owners in the room as well. This one is something that is near and dear, having worked in those both areas in different locations as well. I know how important, again, the technology on the slide 62, so the service quality one that was on there. And this might be one where, Doc, you may have a commentary on this one, or either audit. I know that there have been extensive conversations, but just the idea that the tough books that we have, and I might be a little off in the technology rhetoric, but making sure that we are utilizing the technology that we already have on the hardware side, to me seems like an indicator that we're actually making headway on this request. And then also, I wanted to make sure that we address the idea of the accident incident retraining. Also, another, penchant project is that, can our manpower withstand the idea of taking folks out? I'm also looking at George when I say this as well, because I know we have made additional headway on our deficit or shortfall for operators, but understand that I think we also need to deep dive, and we don't have to do it today, but what's the definition of a high-risk operator? Someone over here said, it might have been Kylie, I can't remember exactly who, but talking about if we're going to take operators off their run, so to speak, for 3 or 4 days, I'm making that number up, can we withstand that impact, and what does that mean? Because we have to make sure that we balance between an unsafe operator and a service cut. So I want to make sure that we have those conversations. I want to say that we're down somewhere in the 30s or 40s, George, at this point, for the shortfall. 40. And again, this time last year, we were around 150. So I would imagine that we should be able, and that's 150 operators down. So we should be able to kind of speed up the amount of time that folks are actually out for retraining, but I don't know that we can also withstand a certain amount. We have to figure out what that algorithm is. So I just want to mention that we talk through those things. I would expect that the next time that we hear from you guys, we should have an answer to those problems, because that would come up pretty quickly, I'd imagine. So Doc, if you have any commentary on that, and then Tony or whoever is appropriate, want to make sure we hear from you as well.
Yeah, good morning, Chairman Kumar, Ms. Terry, members of the board. I'm Fonse Kara, the Chief Operating Officer here at the Authority. And so while you're getting a lot of information, I actually sat through probably 90% of these audits with the audit team and appreciate the work that was done. As it relates to accident training, we do have the capacity to ensure that everyone is trained. The type of training may differ depending on the type of accident, but for the majority of the accidents, we either try to recreate it on a board with the operator or go back to the scene depending on the type of accident that we have. And so we're committed to making sure that operators are coached and are upgraded in their skills when they have a collision or accident. And so this is one of the areas that we think we will be able to address and move from the unsatisfactory to the satisfactory category fairly well.
Appreciate that. George, if you had any additional information, now's your time. If you don't, that's fine. But wanted to make sure that HR is on board to support Doc's commitment from operations, because we can only do that if we maintain that kind of 50 and under for the manpower to make sure that people are removed when they need to be.
Well, yes, we were in that meeting. I was in roughly all of the same meetings that Doc was. We're on commitment for both of those efforts, both to have their training available when the person's pulled, as well as to reduce that number. And that number of 40 is consistently going down quarter after quarter. So we should not have a problem with addressing this. I know that the team service quality, number of district folks and training folks had robust conversation about how we would address it. We shouldn't have issue addressing this.
One last question, if I can, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I address, and this is another one, the supply chain contract management. So Raj, I'm not sure if this falls under you.
That's ours.
Okay. I had you both listed. And this is really the question for IA, actually. When you talk about the enhanced controls, is that a new system that we're talking about implementing, or is that upgrading the one we have?
No, General Manager Birdsong Terry. There's a number of contracts that are managed within the supply chain management function, and they're decentralized services, such as the tire lease or parts washing machine, or different contracts, uniform contract. So, and there's a newer employee that is responsible for contract management, who's been through contract management training and is entering in the receipts to pay those bills. So we're working with that newer employee and encouraging him to actually go out and into the districts and to meet with the stakeholders and identify that services were provided or products were provided prior to entering those receipts for payment. So it's a process improvement. And by the way, we received a very good management response that we included in our audit report with an agreed upon date, for implementation, and we will follow up and close this matter out accordingly.
Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
All right. In addition to the continuous audits, we have a series of ongoing technology projects which we monitor. I have standing meetings with the directors of both IT and MIS, and as well as India alluded to earlier, the reforming of the IT Council, which will be meeting on a quarterly basis. So some other ongoing IT projects include the Consolidated Train Dispatch System, which is in its final design. We have a team of staff represented by service quality, engineering, and Power and Way headed out to California for the factory acceptance testing later this month. The EasyFarer system, as Josh Miranda provided updates at the last meeting, account-based ticketing is in place, and we're working on fare capping. The bid dispatch system, we are working on some system enhancements, meeting with the system administrator, and we'll be starting an engagement for the system enhancements in the near future. Disaster recovery, the IT department is actively working on the data center co-location efforts. The paratransit scheduling system, they're currently in the pre-work phase of the system upgrade. The robotic process automation, finalizing the procurement of a robotic process automation system to more efficiently test system updates, patches, upgrades. The iStore, which has been out of service for about the last year, is in the final stages of testing. So hopefully in the next month, we'll be able to go live with the updated iStore, and our passengers will be able to purchase their fares through the riderta.com iStore. And additionally, working on the assisting in learning about the fluid management system upgrades, learning management system upgrades, the ticket vending machine consultant, as well as various infrastructure updates. And now I will turn it over to Tony.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll round out the presentation. Special requests and emerging issues. So we had 4 items, that we are in progress. I can happily report on the diverted vendor payment. The authority was a victim of some social engineering, and there was a payment that was diverted. Those monies were recovered through an insurance policy claim, and satisfied that. We have a student operator overtime audit or investigation in progress. We had a request to look at a change directive for the West 117th Rapid Station. It is in the reporting phase. And the Transit Police Office of Professional Standards, a tip that we received, we didn't have enough predication to continue. That's considered complete and done. In terms of our coordination with an external audit side, the State Auditor's Office is on site conducting the 2024 single audit, and we will work with them, as we typically do, to maximize risk coverage and minimize duplication of efforts. We continue to work with the State of Ohio Department of Transportation, the Rail Safety Oversight Program, and then you also saw where Molly reported out that the Federal Transit Administration has a project management oversight consultant that is meeting with us monthly so that we can continue to monitor the rail car replacement program. Status of outstanding follow-up, we've talked about that a lot about that today. We do receive the management responses, agree upon implementation dates, and we do track and follow up on all recommendations until closed. I have reported out this in the past. As you know, that we have a very expensive annual health care expenses for processing claims with our third-party administrators. We are working with our procurement department to procure an audit consultant so that we can begin to look at those claims in compliance with contracts and our plan design. Other projects that we're working on, Stephen mentioned before that we do some advisory work. We certainly have our fraud hotline, and then work on a number of steering committees to provide feedback with our broad knowledge of the organization. Training for the fourth quarter, we had quite a bit of training during the fourth quarter, you can see, taking advantage of local chapters with the Institute of Internal Auditors, the ISACA chapter, and other local training opportunities. And that concludes our presentation. So we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any additional questions from the committee?
No, just a comment, really. Really well done today. Covered a lot of ground, and having full staffing clearly shows the benefit. So hats off. Thank you.
Agreed. Okay. If not, thank you again for your efforts. As the mayor said, greatly appreciated. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting adjourned.